And VAT. We believe it's a very interesting and a hot topic at the moment, and we would like to talk a little more about it. My name is Nimish Goyal. I'm a partner at WTS Dhruva Consultants. Now, before we start, I'll probably just take 5 minutes to set the context and talk about the whole journey of retail in UAE. Now, traditionally and even culturally, as we are aware, that UAE has been a shopper's paradise, and historically we had the traditional souks and bazaars. So, the world famous gold souk, spice souk. We had the pearl market and the carpet souk. Gradually, with the intention of making UAE and Dubai as one of the preferred global destination for shopping, the government decided to move from the more traditional souks and bazaars to the more fancied stores and malls. We had Emaar, Nakheel, and some of the top developers constructing and operating some of the most iconic, sophisticated, and largest malls in the country. I think the intention was clear that we build large retail malls, we bring all the global brands under one roof, and we invite millions of people to come and shop in the country. Concept was straight. With low customs duty and almost no taxes, the concept of retail in UAE was thriving. I think all of you would perhaps agree that e-commerce has been a recent phenomena in UAE, and it was only in 2017 when Amazon decided to invest and look at the region when they bought over Souk. So Souk, as we all are aware, was the first platform, the e-commerce platform in the country. And with Amazon putting emphasis on this region, we saw a lot of local regional players also looking at this industry. So we had Mr. Mohammed Alabar launching his own venture on of Noon.com. Then we had Namshi.com. Now, while on one side we had these platforms selling goods, on the other side we also had a lot of platforms selling services. So we had Careem, as a competition to Uber. We saw Zomato and Talabat allowing people to order food online. We had Dubizzle allowing people to sell their second-hand goods, Property Finder to allow people to book properties. So there was a plethora of activities that was happening around e-commerce. Now, with deeper penetration of internet, millennials forming a significant portion of the population, and with an extensive use of plastic money in the form of credit cards, e-commerce was booming, and it was COVID-19 that actually uh, push the accelerator and kind of make it a completely different level. It was the COVID-19 days that we saw not only a significantly large number of people moving online for buying, we also saw a lot of retailers moving their traditional brick and mortar stores to online. So we saw Carrefour launching its online marketplace, which allowed the customers to go online and get the stuff delivered at their doorstep. We saw Dubai Mall virtually moving entirely on Noon.com. And I was just reading today morning in the newspaper that even Dragon Mart, the iconic Dragon Mart, which where it's a symbol of retail malls, going online now. So we can see a lot of activities, across sectors on e-commerce. Now, while the companies were still looking to establish their businesses, structures, and organization, tax was never a part of this discussion, and rightfully because UAE never had a tax. Now, it was only early 2018 when UAE introduced VAT, and tax started getting attention of the CFOs and the boardroom. We all know that VAT is a transaction tax now, which means that every transaction in the supply chain needs to be analyzed from a tax perspective. Now, if I look at the e-commerce platforms, right from vendor boarding to who stocks the goods, whether the platform acts as an agent or whether the supplier is selling directly to the customers, what happens to the tax impact on the incentives given by the vendors. So each and every aspect needs to be checked and thoroughly analyzed. And I think it was in light of the sector booming, government focusing a lot on e-commerce, and tax forming a significant part of the discussions, that FTA took notice of this and released a VAT guide. So this guide was released just a couple of months back. It's a fairly extensive guide, covers a lot of aspects around e-commerce. throws light on some of the issues that typically the e-commerce players were facing. But at the same time, we still believe that there are a lot of other issues which, as a sector, the sector is facing, but potentially has not been analyzed or has not been answered in the e-commerce guide. And to discuss some of these issues is what this webinar is all about. And we have a great panel today to discuss some of these issues. If you ask me, I think we couldn't have asked for a better panel. We have the head of tax for three of the largest retail and e-commerce companies in the country. And if I may start introducing them, first we have Ashish Kabra. Ashish, thank you for joining us. Ashish heads the tax function at Emaar, along with its e-commerce arm, Namshi. Ashish has been a veteran in tax. He has been with Emaar for close to 14 years. He has been instrumental in managing the taxes not only in the Middle East but also in India and other countries. He was the in charge of implementing VAT in Dubai and also successfully implemented GST in India. So we look forward to an extensive discussion with Ashish on his practical experience of managing the tax at Emaar. Prior to joining Emaar, Ashish was also with one of the big fours for a large part of his career. Then we have Nitin Agarwal. Nitin heads taxation at MAF Retail and Carrefour. Extensive experience, has got almost 20 years of experience on managing multi-geography and multi-industry expertise. So he has worked in India and in Middle East with a diversified experience of not only managing tax but also audit and a risk. Nitin was part of the core team that implemented VAT in UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi for one of the largest conglomerates of Middle East. Nitin, thank you so much for joining us. And then we have Kalai. Kalai has a long name, so I'll take the liberty of calling him Kalai. Kalai heads global tax and compliances at Noon.com, the largest local e-commerce portal, as we all are aware. Kalai has an extensive experience of managing taxes not only in UAE but also in India. So Kalai was a part of the core team at Flipkart. Flipkart, as some of you may be aware, was the first e-commerce portal in India, which was later taken over by Walmart. And he was a part of the core team that successfully transitioned from Flipkart to Walmart. And Kalai has also quite an extensive experience on various process automations around invoicing, accounting, compliances, reconciliations, and reporting. So we'll have a lot of perspective from Kalai today on some of the technology aspects of running an e-commerce portal. And then in the end, I have my colleague Deepak. Deepak is an associate partner at Dhruva. Is a sector expert on retail. So Deepak will be taking over some of the industry issues and will also have an engagement with the panelists. So with that, if I can just quickly talk about the agenda. What we have done is we have picked up, although there are loads of issues on e-commerce, and we could have taken the entire day discussing them, but we've just picked up 5 key issues, which in our experience of advising some of the largest e-commerce and retail companies in the country, we have experienced. And these are some of the issues which are quite challenging, which involves a lot of discussions and which need a larger audience. So, brand versus product marketing, discount funding, undelivered shipments, typically when vendors are outside of UAE and the goods are returned by the customers. So what happens in those situations? Taxability of electronic services, one of the most onerous and difficult subject. We'll have a good extensive discussion. We have some case study on electronic services. And then towards the end, we'll talk about disclosed and undisclosed agency, something which has been discussed in detail in the FTA guide as well. And then towards the end, we'll have some final thoughts. We'll try and collate the discussion points that we gather from this discussion. And if the time permits, we may also have a Q&A. Although we believe that the 5 issues that we have picked up are very quite robust and extensive. But if time permits, we will be happy to take some Q&A towards the end. So with that, let me request Deepak to start the discussion. Deepak, over to you.
Thank you, Nimish. Thank you for setting the context. Good morning to all. Welcome to this webinar. Before we dig deep into the subject, e-commerce, navigating e-commerce through the VAT web, I'm sure people would agree when we talk about VAT and complexities, the two industries that vividly come to our mind is financial services and real estate. But let me tell you, we've been handling a lot of e-commerce companies from a VAT perspective, and we were really surprised to see a lot of transactions which had their own challenges and complexities. Now, if you look at the screen to your right, we've just plotted some of the many issues that e-commerce companies have been facing in UAE and across the Middle East for that matter. So to take you through one or two and then dig into the further 5 issues that Nimish mentioned. One is around the obligation of a marketplace. So what happens is when there is a non-resident supplier who supplies goods into UAE and he does not comply with the UAE VAT law, does the marketplace become responsible? Now, why we mention this issue is because some of the EU countries have made the marketplace responsible for accounting for VAT. The other is online payment authorization. So I'm sure some of you would be aware, when you purchase a particular product, your credit card gets blocked for a particular amount, and that amount does not get released to the seller up to 5 or 7 days. So from a seller's perspective, how do I look at it? When do I pay the tax on such amounts? The other is around IP created around customer databases. I'm sure people may be aware, or some of you may not be aware, when you get registered on a particular marketplace, your data gets potentially exploited by websites, and that's where the again complexity around taxability may arise. One more issue, just to mention, is around promotions and offers, where you may have buy one get one, step up promotions, discounts on your next purchase, cashbacks, etc. The other related issue around this could be, how do you depict all these promotions on your invoice? So these are some of the some of the issues which we thought are very relevant, but we'll restrict our discussion to only the 5 issues which we'll come to in a minute. Right now, before we get into these issues, I'll just like to highlight the panelists would be sharing their views, and these are their personal views and may not necessarily represent their organization's views. So to start with, the first issue is around brand marketing and product marketing. Now, to set the context here, marketing services potentially, if they are provided in UAE, they would be standard rated, where I presume both service receiver and provider are in the UAE. Now from a brand marketing and product marketing, what we are looking at is the brand principal or the supplier is located outside UAE and the seller is in UAE and undertaking these activities. Now, to explain the concept around brand marketing is a much broader concept where you are not actually promoting any particular product, but you are promoting a brand. So if you take as an example, I promote Samsung as a brand. I really do not go and promote their products. That's brand marketing. Compared to that, product marketing is where you actually promote a specified product. It could be, let's say, a Galaxy particular series of phones. That's what I'm promoting. So that's the distinction between brand marketing and product marketing. Now, what we've seen is the challenge could arise in terms of, how do I tax these services? Do I zero rate these? Do I standard rate it? Because the fact that the brand principal or the person to whom I'm rendering these services is outside UAE. So I think what we can do here is, maybe I'll just ask Ashish to pitch in here and share his thoughts in terms of how does he see the taxability of brand marketing versus product marketing. Ashish?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks Deepak and Nimish for this invitation and for raising this question, which is very pertinent to all the listeners and participants. I think before we look at the taxability of the brand marketing product, I think it's very important to understand the concept of a place of service for these. So technically and theoretically, it looks very simple. This is a place of actual use and enjoyment of the services. Especially if both the receiver and the service provider in the same jurisdiction. It's a very straightforward concept. However, things get very, very complicated and practically difficult to apply when you have a recipient who is a multinational operating into multiple jurisdictions, and that is where the complication arises. So in that context, currently, based on the existing regulations in the UAE, a position can be taken or can be justified that pure brand marketing is something which can be certainly out of scope and be considered for zero rating because the actual recipient is located outside of the UAE. However, when it comes to a product marketing, this is something is an area of concern, and the potential position which can be taken by the authority that yes, at least a portion of it relates to marketing services within the country for a specific product. So this is what I personally feel. Yeah.
Right. I think I would agree with what you just said. I think product marketing especially could be a challenge, and I'm sure you would agree. There is this Article 31 which talks about zero rating particular services, and I think there is some clause around services related to personal movable assets, and potentially that's the challenge I believe the tax authorities may look at in line of the fact that the product is located in UAE when you are actually marketing or product marketing the services, right? So thank you so much, Ashish. I think maybe I'll just get in Nitin here in terms of understanding. So I believe Nimish mentioned Nitin has been instrumental in implementing VAT for a large conglomerate in the GCC country. So Nitin, just your thoughts in terms of how does a Bahrain or a KSA look at such an issue, a brand marketing or a product marketing?
Thank you, Deepak, and a good morning to everyone. Well, Deepak, this is actually a very important issue to be considered when we look at the tax laws for the three countries that have implemented VAT in the GCC. The Bahrain and KSA legislations look at it slightly differently than what the UAE deals it with. So if we look at the Bahrain import and export guide that was issued, the guide clearly mentions that wherever the benefits are derived in the state, that is where even if the recipient of the service is located outside the state, the service still needs to be standard rated. So this is in stark, basically this is in stark difference to what the UAE deals with. The principle of the benefit of the service derived in the state is not there in the UAE law as of now. So that is where it creates a different treatment for the same services in the different states.
Right. I agree. I think you're echoing what Ashish has mentioned. But yes, from a UAE perspective, it could pose some challenges considering the fact that the use and enjoyment concept is limited only to electronic services from a VAT perspective. I believe this could be a good area for the FTA to issue some clarification. Thanks, Nitin. So moving to the next issue, which is around discount funding. This is my favorite. Actually, I could go on for hours on this issue, but just to set the context again here. So I'm sure some of you would be aware what happens typically is that there is a vendor in UAE. There is a marketplace, and there is a customer who places an order on, let's say, a marketplace. If you look at the example on your screen, let's say a customer has ordered a phone which was worth 2,000, but there is a discount of 10% that has been offered. So the customer gets the product at 1,800 dirhams, and that's what the that's what the amount at which the seller would pay VAT. Now, if you look at it this way, there is again a back-to-back arrangement between the seller and, let's say, potentially an e-payment company like a Visa or a MasterCard, or potentially a brand principal, where the company outside UAE agrees to fund this discount of 200 dirhams. So what it essentially means is, although the customer receives the product at 1,800, the seller gets paid the entire 2,000. Right, so the 200 moves from Visa or the brand principal to the seller in UAE. So that's where we are ending up in terms of understanding whether this 200 dirhams that is being received from outside UAE, could this be taxable? Could it attract 5%, or would it be zero rated? So I think considering, we have Kalay, and who's been dealing with such issues on and off, I would request Kalay, if you can come in and explain to us what are your thoughts on the taxability of this 200, and also look at the the fact, how do I pay the tax, and then what would be my date of supply for such amounts that I receive from outside UAE?
Yeah. So thanks Deepak for that. And yeah, this could potentially lead consider as a split consideration arrangement between the seller and the brand. So here the practical challenges exist that at what level the transaction will be needed. And typically in this e-commerce industry, the products are delivered and returned on a very frequent basis. It runs up to 20-25%. Now, effectively categorizing the transactions up to what is the level of completed transactions and identifying this is just a bit of a time consuming activity. And then subsequently, whether the invoice has to be generated at a transaction level or summary level would precisely depend on these issues. Now, coming to the time of supply, yes, if it is related to the product, definitely the time of supply could be relevant probably to the product and the time of generating of the invoice for the underlying product. That could be a view that can be adapted.
Right. Thanks, Ellen. So what I understand is you're saying potentially this 200 in the hands of the seller would attract a VAT, considering it's a third party consideration or a split consideration. On the second point around date of supply, I would tend to agree that you need to pay VAT at the invoice level, the tax invoice when you issue to the customer. But practically what we've seen is there are certain companies who've taken a view that I am not really sure whether the customer will accept this product or reject it. So what the companies do is they set a time period of, let's say, 15 days or a month to collate the entire details around such discounts funded by brand principals, and they pay the VAT at the end of the month or the 15 days period. So that's a different approach that we've seen around, supplier funded discounts. Moving on, I thought, as I said, I really like this topic, and I just wanted to put a tricky question to you. Would your answer change for the taxability of this 200 if I were to tell you that you are not getting 200 dirhams, but the brand principal has agreed to pay you 100,000 as a marketing budget? So you tax that 100,000 as a supplier funded discount. So what are your thoughts on those?
Sure, I think this is completely different from what the nature that it would have been. It cannot be considered as an apple-to-apple comparison. Now, the transaction is between me and the brand. Now, the brand is promoting who could be sitting ideally outside UAE, and typically the use and enjoyment is for the person who's sitting outside UAE. But there could be an underlying exponential sale that could happen, maybe because of the brand promotion, and indirectly it contributes to the local sales. So that could be having said that, this particular when it comes to someone who is enjoying using and enjoying having that benefit because of the excessive sale on account of this brand promotion, so if he is outside outside UAE, probably we might have to adapt a position that it's a zero rated transaction.
I would agree with that. So from a perspective that if it's a marketing budget that's given to a seller, that could potentially qualify as zero rated. Having said that, we've already discussed something like a brand marketing or a product marketing, which we'll have to be careful of.
So I would like to jump in and say probably as I shared my view, this can be seen more of a product marketing. It's not a pure brand marketing, because there's somehow a direct connection with selling on a similar platform. So to me, any aggressive authority would be looking at more as a taxable supply rather than as a zero rated. This is my personal view on this. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I think sorry, Kale, go ahead.
So yeah, definitely there is a lot of chances about taking the pro revenue approach whenever the tax authorities look at there is a gap for us to. This is kind of sometimes goes to the extent so that it's at the end of the day everyone wants to expand their revenue bucket, and all tax authorities would be deemed to expect that to happen. So definitely definitely it's an interpretational thing, and I'm sure one or the other way it gets settled down over a period of time, maybe some sort of a clarification or a regulatory change, so that it gives a very wide and open and clear view about a particular transaction. So we are able to clearly cover what is marketing and what is the product based.
Got it. So I think the message is very clear. You need to be very careful on such arrangements, be it discount funds or maybe a marketing support that you're receiving from vendors outside UAE. So before we move to the next issue, I just wanted to mention 2 points here. So I'm sure people would be aware, and I'm sure 100% people would have used these services where you buy a particular movie ticket and you use a specified credit card, you get the other ticket free. You know, this is somewhat a similar transaction where the consideration only 50% goes from you and 50% comes from the credit card company. So the related issue here would be that two tax invoices would be potentially raised, one to the customer and the other to the brand principal or the credit card company which is sponsoring this 50%. Now the question one needs to be mindful of that is, when a tax invoice is issued to the credit card company, will it be eligible to recover the input tax? So that's an open question. The other question could that could make this thing more complex is, what happens if the brand principal is in a free zone? So I'll leave that point there, and we can move to the next issue, which is around undelivered shipments or goods return. So I'm sure people would agree, when a transaction happens in UAE between a seller and a customer, and if the goods are rejected or not accepted, it's a pretty straightforward transaction where the seller issues a tax invoice and then issues a tax credit note to nullify the transaction. But things could go a bit complex where the supplier is actually outside UAE. He has listed his product on a marketplace portal or a platform, and the customer in UAE orders online, and the products get supplied by the seller to the customer. Now, so for the benefit of the audience, so when you import the goods, considering the supplier does not have a presence here, the customs agent would be accounting for the VAT and paying that to the tax authorities. But at the same time, the agent would recover this as part of his, in addition to his commission. So in a sense, there is no person to claim an input tax of the VAT paid on such transaction. So the point here is, what happens where these goods are either not delivered or the customer rejects these goods. So in a typical transaction, these would have been returned to the supplier. But the point comes up is, considering the fact that the 5% that has been paid as import VAT is not recovered by anyone, does that become a cost to the entire sale transaction for the seller? So if I may ask Ashish, I'm sure you would have dealt with such transactions. What would be your suggestion or views around the cost of 5% that potentially the seller would bear?
I think this is a very useful issue which you have brought out, and this is a practical consideration for a lot of suppliers, including our own businesses, where we have suffered a similar kind of disallowances on the export to certain markets where the goods were rejected by the end consumers. So obviously, there's not a single solution which is fit for all. Obviously, there has to be some options which can be considered, including setting up a local operations or tying up with the intermediary service provider, either the undisclosed agent, and looking at the cost benefit analysis and the long term business prospects for that location. A decision can be arrived at, from a way of operating the model can be developed accordingly.
Right. So I believe the thought you're sharing is basically a seller who has incurred such VAT in UAE may do a cost benefit analysis to see whether it makes sense for the supplier to get registered in UAE. And see whether the 5% could be taken as an input tax, and against the obviously other cost around compliances, logistics, etc.
Yeah.
And I believe
at least for an e-commerce business, this is a significant consideration, because the number of rejections or cancellations and the refunds are significant, and it could completely wipe out the margins. Because obviously the margins on which e-commerce company trade is bare minimum. Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure this becomes more relevant for countries like KSA, where the tax rate is 15%.
That's right. So especially after the rate change, this issue has become very critical from a KSA perspective, and probably people are now more conscious about the UAE with the possible rate change in the next couple of years.
Right. I wouldn't really go to that tangent of looking at tax change rate increase in UAE. But having said that, once we see the supplier getting registered in UAE, I believe that would not really be a permanent kind of a registration. The agent will still continue importing goods on behalf of the supplier. And so the one needs to be mindful of the fact that once the agent is paying VAT after the supplier is registered, the agent will have to comply with Article 57, where he'll have to issue statements to the supplier for him to recover that VAT. Right. The other part of this discussion could be, we've seen a lot of sellers, based outside UAE doing a stock and sale, where they set up shops, not shops really, basically a warehouse, and do their fulfillment from this particular warehouse. I think that should be a straightforward case where they pay VAT and charge VAT to the customer and claim the input tax. Right. So if we move to the next issue, this is I'm sure, Nimish, you did mention earlier that electronic services in itself is a topic, and I'm sure we could have another webinar and it could span over a 2-hour session, but I'll try and do some justice to this topic. So if we look at electronic services per se, the law requires 2 factors when it comes to electronic services, right? One is they have given a definition where they've specified, let's say, a music download, a software, a movie, etc. So one has to be falling in those categories first, part of the requirement. The other is that these should be delivered automatically over the internet. There should not be a human intervention in such supplies. So that's what is the definition of electronic services. Now so the place of supply is the other part, which becomes very important for electronic services. So if you remember, I initially mentioned, even from a brand marketing perspective, the use and enjoyment concept is not there. But for electronically delivered services, the use and enjoyment concept comes into play. The UAE law is very clear. It says you need to look at where the use and enjoyment of the service is happening, right? So if the use and enjoyment is happening in the UAE, so if you look at this example, which we'll just put up on the screen, there is a person in UAE who has subscribed to a music company for listening to or downloading music. If this transaction happens in UAE, then there is a VAT applicable on this. But now what happens if the customer moves, let's say, to a country outside UAE on a vacation and downloads a particular music? So if I were to look at this place of supply, then the use and enjoyment of this service is happening outside UAE. Therefore, we need to look at whether this could get taxed or not. The other part is around the location of the recipient, right? Now, again, the place of supply vis-a-vis the use of enjoyment could get a bit complex. Therefore, the authorities through this guide have clarified that you need to look at, so there could be different services involved in electronic services. One could be where these services are delivered to a particular location. So let's say a TV subscription, right? So that TV would be at your residence where you receive those services. So the law says you need to look at the location where those services are delivered. Certain services could be delivered over a portable device, let's say a mobile phone or a tablet, right? So there again, you'll have to see where the use and enjoyment is happening. Now, there could be cases where it would be very difficult to determine where the use and enjoyment is happening, and therefore we need to look at the location of the recipient. Now, so in terms of the guide that has come up, they have explained how do you look at location of recipient. They've given examples to say you need to look at the IP address of the device from which the user is purchasing goods, or you need to look at the country code of the SIM. You go ahead and look at where the customer is residing or his residence address. They have gone to the extent of saying you look at the bank or the credit card which is being used by the customer. So those are the things, so that's kind of a bit of complex arrangement altogether. The last part of electronic services is around the compliance requirement. So if you look at the example which I've given down, a part of the services gets consumed in UAE and a part of it is in UK, right? So how do I report this in terms of my return? So as such, I'm sure people would agree it's a very complex, electronic services as a subject itself is very complex. So I would just request, Kalai, maybe Kalai, if you can share your thoughts. I'm sure you would have come across such transactions where the download or the service is subscribed at one place but gets utilized at other place. Kalai?
Yes, Deepak, and that's quite tricky. Just not for me, just around the world, it's quite tricky. So I mean, around the world, the tax authorities have been trying to see what could be the most ideal way to measure and benchmark such transaction and see whether from the VAT applicability point of view. So yes, like I mean, there is always like the place of supply is always dependent on the use and enjoyment. As you rightly said, like the problem is when it's with a fixed material, say a TV, I can't carry that away. But if it's a Netflix, say I can access through the laptop, the mobiles, everywhere, and I can also give it to my family members who could reside in multiple countries. Now the complexity is that I would have resided in UAE, I would have paid it VAT, but the particular country where my relatives or like the friends and families are sitting over, they could also be enjoying. So now there is a issue around where they are going to, how the country of where the people are located but doesn't get any direct benefit, how that is going to be viewed. This is quite a little of a challenge. Yes, there are certain measures that we could look at, say for example, maybe a SIM card number or the IP address and or others, but are we would these items be able to measure and give that? Now, I can give you one more example, like say a telecom industry. You could have taken a mobile phone in UK. Now it is in roaming. You are coming to UAE. Now UAE, I've been spending 7 months in UAE. Now I pay the roaming charges and other things. Now the complexity is that whether these roaming charges, whether the telecom company of UK has to give that money to the UAE entity or not. So these are some of the very complex and tricky questions, and around the world people have been working around it. And if you take some of the countries like Australia, Japan, and EU, they have adopted a method where if the end consumer is in the particular location and he is not, then ideally they try to force the non-resident companies to take a non-resident registration and have a tax representative and keep filing the returns and discharge their local tax liabilities. But to that, what could be the measure? Whether it's going to be the SIM card or billing address or the bank account details. I might have one mail ID which could be attached, but I could give multiple credit cards associated with it. And one time I could use my UK cards, and second time I can use my UAE card. So now what could be what it could lead up to? So these are the very complex issues that we have around, and I think this is something where a lot of debates have to happen around the world, and it's happening. And should this is, as I said, there is no right or wrong in this case unless we have a certain measured action that could really give a better measurement of the service and the tax applicability to it, and then the respective relevant tax authorities have to come in together and decide what it has to be done at a larger perspective. So that's my viewpoint on it. And yes, as I said, it's very tricky, and like I can't say a yes or a no to this, and that's how I can drive this.
I think that makes absolute sense. And Kala, I wouldn't have agreed more with you. Actually, I have seen a case where people have subscription. Let's say I have a subscription of Netflix based sitting in UAE, where there's a family package or something where one person sitting in UAE allows his mother, father in India to use it, or his friend in UK or US to use it. So it's going to be very tricky in the sense, how do you determine use and enjoyment? I believe that's where countries, specifically in EU, Bahrain and KSA as well, they've not gone into the complexities around use and enjoyment, and they've just said that look at the residence of the customer, right? So what is the address that you've used to book that particular service, and then you accordingly pay a VAT on those services. So that's something very interesting in terms of electronic services. Thank you so much, Kalai. Moving to the last topic of our webinar is around disclosed and undisclosed agency, right? I'm sure some of you would be aware, typically in a disclosed agency arrangement, there is a supplier, there is an agent, and the goods are supplied by the supplier through the agent to the customer. Now, the disclosed agency works in the manner that the customer is very well aware that the agent is acting on behalf of the supplier. Therefore, the invoice that gets issued to the customer is of the supplier. So the supplier can issue a tax invoice directly to the customer, or he may ask the agent to raise those invoices on behalf of the supplier. And finally, the agent will raise a tax invoice for the commission. So that's a simple concept around disclosed agency. Now, if you move to undisclosed agency, which is where some bit of complexity gets arisen, is where there is a supplier, again, a customer and an agent. The supplier sells these goods through the agent. However, the customer is not aware that the agent is acting on behalf of the supplier. So from a VAT perspective, that's where this guide has been issued. And let me tell you one thing. I think in the last 2.5 years, this is the first guide which has spoken so much in detail about the disclosed and undisclosed agency concept. So going back to the transaction, what will happen is, from a VAT law perspective, the supplier will raise an invoice on the tax agent and on the undisclosed agent, and the undisclosed agent will raise an invoice on the customer. So there are principally two supplies that are happening, and that's how the law looks at it. Now, the question here that comes around is that agent will still be recovering a commission from the supplier, right? Now, the guide here has spoken about this, and they say that the guide says that if the commission is inbuilt into the tax invoice raised for the principal supply, then it needs to take the color of the underlying supply, right? But if it's not, if it's charged separately to the supplier, then you need to tax it separately. So that, I think the complexity is more around undisclosed agency and the commission. Maybe I'll ask Nitin. I'm sure, Nitin, you would have handled such transactions both in your earlier organization and in Carrefour. So what kind of challenges do you perceive that potentially the agent will face from his commission perspective?
Very rightly highlighted, Deepak. Actually, this is a transaction where if this undisclosed agent transaction happens within the UAE, then it's pretty straightforward in all cases. But where a scenario pans out that the supplier is outside the UAE, that is where a potential complication digs in. So if we take an example, so let's say the supplier outside the UAE has an agent in UAE, and the agent in UAE then sells to a customer in UAE. And the transaction is structured in a way that the commission is inbuilt into the price of the items that the agent is charging to the customer. Then as per the guidance, basically the commission and the price of the item has to be standard rated because the transaction happens in UAE. Whereas the recipient of that commission service is actually a recipient outside of the UAE. Where if we bifurcate the transaction and had it been an arrangement where the commission had to be billed separately, that commission would have been zero rated. So, I mean, depending on the structuring of the transaction and the commercial arrangement, that is where the taxability of commission could be different in those two given scenarios.
Right. I agree with that. Then I think, the other example, what comes to my mind is what happens where the supplier, the principal supplier, is making a zero rated supply or an exempt supply.
Exactly.
So in which case the supplier would be raising a tax invoice for zero rated. Whereas if I look at it, if under an undisclosed agency concept, the commission per se should have been taxable.
Standard rated, yeah.
Into the price, this could go as zero rated or an exempt. So I think there's some bit of potentially structuring here, which agents could think about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That really brings me to the end of my discussion. Thank you so much, Nitin, Ashish, and Kalai, for your thoughts. And with this, I'll ask Nimish to take over for the final part of the webinar. Nimish, over to you.
Deepak, thank you so much. And I must say, Deepak, that I think although we touched, as I mentioned earlier, we touched only 5 issues, but these are probably some of the burning issues being faced by the e-commerce companies. And while I was listening to Ashish, Nitin, and Kalai, my interest peaked when Ashish spoke about his his experience of Saudi, where overseas vendors are transacting through the platform, and in that case, when the goods are returned, so whether the overseas supplier needs to be registered in Saudi. And Ashish, I think that was a very valid point, saying that that cost benefit analysis needs to be done. Whether you are okay to have a VAT cost set up in the country in which you are transacting, or whether you need to take a registration in that country, recover the VAT charge. So I think that's a very, very commercial decision, which probably a lot of people are either not aware of or don't think through about it. I think that was very, very helpful. And Kalai, you obviously spoke on my favorite topic of electronic services. I think, and as you rightly said, the challenge with electronic services is humongous. It is so difficult to even understand how do you determine the use and enjoyment. And as Deepak gave an example of a Netflix subscription being used across territories, Although we are aware that the sophisticated and the larger jurisdictions like EU and Australia have a fair bit of fair bit of guidance available on this issue, whereas in UAE we still don't have it, and therefore this could potentially lead to some debates and discussions with the FTA. With that, I would just go on some final thoughts, and this is one issue which we thought we'll just pick up the brains from all the three panelists. We have seen how Europe, has now been moving to e-invoicing and integration of the taxpayers' systems with the tax authority system, and this is a thought which is now gaining momentum worldwide. EU is implementing it, UK for that matter. India is also going live with this integration of systems and the tax authorities, taxpayers and the tax authority system, which typically means, so if you look at the transaction, so how it works out is that the supplier says is based in UK and he issues an invoice, he supplies goods to a customer and issues an invoice. Now on a real-time basis, the invoice would then get captured in the system of HMRC, which is the tax authority there. And when the customer receives the invoice and recovers the VAT charge to him, then that information is automatically populated with the tax authority. Now this effectively means that even before the invoice is issued to the customer, the tax authorities have full knowledge of the invoices that are being issued. And and making tax digital, which is the concept UK is introducing, which means that the entire bit of reporting also goes online and on a real-time basis. So what we wanted to just quickly discuss with the panelists here is that do you think this happening in UAE sooner rather than later? UAE, as we all know, has been technologically far more sophisticated and advanced. And in your experience, because all of you implemented VAT and implemented systems when the VAT was getting introduced, so do you see a challenge from a systems perspective? So maybe if I can request Ashish to maybe first come in and share. Ashish, what do you think will be the scenario going forward in UAE?
My personal view is that this is a very logical extension of the work the FTA is currently doing. UAE being one of the leader in technological advancements, and this is something they would be looking at. And this is having looked at the developed market like UK, India. This is what they've been following. So from my personal view, I think this is something which is a natural and logical progression of the application of the VAT regulations in the country. And yes, this is obviously going to be far more advantageous from a overall control perspective, and to avoid any potential leakages or VAT frauds for that matter. And ideally, it should be a staged implementation. May not be applicable to all the entities. Maybe there could be a threshold from a transaction limit perspective or a size of organization perspective, or it could be by invitation by the authority at initial stage. So from that perspective, yes, I don't see any reason for UAE not implementing it in the next couple of years. And as and when the authority decides to this, will be one of the more supportive organizations to back up this initiative.
I'm sure. That's an interesting comment, Ashish, which you made, that it should be in a phased manner. And if we look at some of the countries that have either gone live or are going live, they have also adopted something similar. Instead of having the entire taxpayers base go in one go, it makes more sense to pick up the larger organizations like perhaps and then implement it phase wise. And so maybe Kalai, if you have seen the implementation of GST in India and how sophisticated the network out there is. Do you see something similar happening? What has been your experience of when it comes to technology and integration of such systems with the tax authorities?
Yeah, so now, like generally, if you see a lot of, around the world, this has been happening, and it's a, I would say, like as a technology world, this is the way we have to adapt ourselves. And like e-invoicing is one solution where the data can be available to the taxpayer and the tax authorities on a real-time basis, where it can be just if you, then the data flows into the return side. So where everything is pre-populated, so you know that where exactly how exactly the data has to represent and how it has to move on. Now, like, but definitely, like this needs definitely a robust technology system in place, having a necessary backend system, having a lot of debates and discussions around with the, some of the larger houses to understand what are the complexities around with their existing ERP, or whether it is in-house ERP or the customized ERP or off-the-shelf ERP. And some of the cases is that what level of data that could be needed, whether the restriction is going to be at a B2B level or it has to consider as a B2C level also. Yes, one point is that definitely government wants to understand and ensure that no evasion happens from the tax and avoid any sort of fraud from the tax revenue perspective. But definitely, like we got to be also cognizant that the B2B is where the bigger ITC is coming in, where we have to ensure that like this is, there is no revenue loss to the government, of course. But when it comes to B2C, definitely nobody is taking, much of an input on that. But definitely it is pretty much a smaller players they are playing around. And as you said, whether at a threshold level something can be implemented, yes, that's a way to go, because like if you see the smaller organization may not have that effort and the technical the resource to do that infrastructure. Of course, we have moved away from not even moved over, we are just mid of the pandemic now. Practical challenge is that now business are trying to recover from the slack that they had for the last 9 months time or 8 months time. Now again, so if the business have to invest on the technology at this point of time, or maybe next 1 year or so, it could be really challenging about diversion of the resource that is supposed to push into the business to get that back. And like rather than that, if this has been spent in terms of technology, and that's kind of like a kind of a heavy toll on the business side. That's my suggestion. And definitely this is a very effective way to go ahead. And of course, what I sense is that definitely the tax authorities can look at to try to implement this in the next 1 year time. And definitely it may take another 6 months to 1 year time to settle down, because like to and fro issues are there. And generally in larger developed or economies, they try to bring in an intermediary between the tax authority system and the seller. So this is an intermediary which will meet the expectations of the tax authority and as the and the taxpayer. So that, and they take the pain on them, and then they handle it better. So rather than taxpayer taking all the pain in terms of interacting with the tax authorities and things. And so the last point, what I feel is that if it is going on a real-time approval basis, then definitely it should be completely fine. But my concern is around if it is getting into an policing mode, where it gets into an approval mode. Now, what could be forming part of the valid tax invoice or not? It varies from each and every set of business it handles. For example, what is needed in a real estate economy may not be needed in a retail economy. What is retail economy is not needed in a technology economy. So this will create a lot of complications around what could be what has to form part of the e-invoicing system, and what are the bare minimum things that it has to be present, so that the tax authorities who are approving can take an even measure across the verticals, so that there is no real-time cancellation also happens. Like if the rejection happens, what could be the time in which I have to rectify the system? So what if there is a credit note and debit note issued, whether this also has to be approved or put across to the system in the tax authority? That is also another complexity that come in. Now, if you see in a larger scale, like there could be multiple invoices, but I could create one credit note. Now, if you say that, what ideal way is that looking at the credit note equal to, if there is less than equal to the previous invoice, it can be approved. Now, these are the complex, how systems will be viewed from this perspective, and these gonna be like approval basis or on a real-time approval basis. So like only thing I would suggest is that if it is getting into a kind of a policing and approval way, that's going to be really painful for the business. Of course, UAE is always known for the pro-business kind of an approach. Definitely, there could always be a positive way of interaction and positive way of execution, and definitely the systems, I believe, it will be much more agile in terms of execution.
Kalai, thank you. I think I could sense the passion in your voice, and I think that comes out purely from the fact that you've actually implemented the systems in some of the largest e-commerce companies, and this was coming out. So there are three very interesting points that you make, Kalai. One was having an intermediary between the government and the taxpayers. I think that's a very important point, that instead of dealing directly with the government authorities, should there be an intermediary that can connect or be a conduit between the taxpayer and the government and the tax authority. The other important point you made was that this could perhaps be implemented in 1 year, which I think is fairly aggressive. I mean, I think the companies at the moment are still struggling to even look at the basic VAT compliances done through the EIPs, and that is where I will maybe ask Nitin to share his views. And the other one, which was on the lines of policing, and if I can maybe just quickly go back to Ashish and ask his views. Would he agree with that statement of that? Would it be a system to improve efficiencies, or would it be like a watchdog on the taxpayer?
Even if it's a watchdog kind of a view which is taken, this is something the prerogative of the FTA or the authority. If something is not something we can choose or we can have an opinion on. Yes, maybe if it is an over policing or something, it's not done in the right spirit. Yes, we could have a concern and can raise it accordingly. But globally, all the authorities have this right to do the policing or the required checks, because obviously there have been multiple cases of evasion, deferral, in all economies of the world. So there's nothing wrong in a local authority being very proactive in their approach. So personally, I don't see this to be anti-business or negative from that perspective.
And that kind of makes sense, Ashish, also, because if you look at the whole objective of this making tax digital would be to see that there are no unscrupulous elements. So anyways, the target would be to capture them and take them out of the system and analyze them. Whereas the honest taxpayers should not even get bothered about getting these changes.
So one more point which I could say is also not only from an audit or policing perspective, is even a genuine mistake should be identified. See, there could be an honest mistake where the business is doing, and unfortunately, if that is not captured within a limited time, there will be unwarranted delay penalties and fines which could be levied. Which would probably with this kind of an integration, those situations can be avoided, because that's highly embarrassing for the business and the FTA.
Absolutely, it makes sense. So maybe Nitin, if I can quickly ask you, your views on this whole digitization of system integration. You've also worked extensively on the systems. So what will be your opinion?
Well, I agree with Ashish's views regarding, that one word, a proactive compliance. It summarizes it all. When we implemented VAT, all of us had that vision that yes, this can be done only through implementing controls on ERP systems and IT systems.
Right.
And if this e-invoicing approach goes ahead through the FTA, that is the one way through which the businesses can make sure that we are compliant. The second point, as again rightly highlighted by Ashish, that this will make sure that the compliance is not done just to evade or prevent evasion. It is done to support the businesses in making sure that they are compliant. So as in other mature jurisdictions, yes, that is the way to go, of course. And the businesses need to be prepared in terms of the change management and in terms of the IT efforts that are required on the various systems, through whatever relaxations that the FTA may provide in terms of the time of implementation or in terms of the materiality of the invoice or the size of the business or whatever. I mean, that remains to be seen.
Right. I just hope that we get enough time to for the taxpayers get enough time to integrate all these things. Unlike how VAT was introduced, where I mean all of us believe that not enough and sufficient time was given. I think this has been a very interactive discussion, if I may so say. Ashish, Nitin, Kalai, really thankful to you for coming to our webinar. Really appreciate the three of you taking your time out for this session. I think we have had some very interesting discussions, and I would like to also thank the entire audience for being a patient audience and being a wonderful crowd. What we'll do is, so because we are running short of time, so we may not be able to take any Q&A. If there are any questions, we will probably collate them and maybe circulate it to the panelists for their views, and if possible, we can share them with the audience. So once again, thank you so much, Ashish, Nitin, and Kalai, for being with us. You're an absolute great panelists, and thank you everybody for being on this webinar. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.